Hey everyone, this is James from TeaDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I am going to be talking about what I titled in the article, the 4 most famous digits in the poor world, and that is none other than 7542. So I recently drank through about 20 different versions of 7542, kind of ranging in age from 2011, I think was the youngest, all the way to 2001. So, it's semi-concentrated within about a decade ago. 1999 actually was the oldest. And it's specifically Munghai Tea Factory 7542. This is not commissions or whatnot. So just if you see those numbers, especially in the 2004 range or so, it doesn't necessarily mean it is Munghai Tea Factory. So very important to make that distinguishing fact. And this is a recipe that, honestly, I did it completely backwards. It's like it took me until 2024, 2025 to really get a good feel for it. And I think I should have done that a decade beforehand in 2014, 2015. Not necessarily because the landscape was better then, but just because I think it really is kind of a benchmark, and it's a good tea. It's a benchmark in the pu'er industry, and it's absolutely worth getting to know, or at least having a bunch of tries with early on in your tea journey. So I think going about it with boutiques first, I think that was a mistake, at least for myself. In this article, I drank through a bunch of them. So if you want to hear my thoughts on the individual teas, go definitely check that out. Tried to check out some of the more famous batches, stuff like 901 as well as 501, which are kind of well known in the pu'er world. And it's kind of amazing just reflecting back in the ways that the factory tea scene in particular is in a pretty good space right now, just in the sense that we can go to somewhere like Quiche Teas. We have access to a lot of pretty good 7542 that we can just go out and buy fairly easily. We also have Taobao, and there's a lot more people using Taobao now than there was 10 years ago to buy pu'er, and there's a lot more 7542 that you can get there. Part of that is because Dai in particular has just made a ridiculous amount of pu'er throughout the years, and so people need to eventually sell that tea to turn a profit or whatnot. And so that stuff is on Taobao, and it's really for quite reasonable prices. I checked out a Marshall article from maybe 5 years ago where he drank through a bunch of 7542 as well through Taobao, and it's interesting because he said that the least expensive that he could find for those teas was $50. Interesting enough, dye prices since then have gone down. And so the tea is possible to find these same recipes for about $30, even less than that sometimes. Not saying that's necessarily great tea. In fact, the storage may not be necessarily preferred, but you can still find these teas for very inexpensive prices. And I think Munghai Tea Factory in particular, for a certain period at least, definitely knew what they were doing. And so even stuff like the 2010 and 2011, they have their appeal. And the fact that we can just very easily grab these for $50 or less now is just very, very nice. So the tea I have pulled out here was just a 7542 I have access to. And I have gotten to know this tea quite a bit throughout the past year or so. And that is the 502 7542, bought from Mr. Jin in a group buy done by Quiche. And I have finished quite a bit of this cake. And it's kind of been one of my go-tos as far as just getting to know the recipe, using it a bit as a reference point to compare with other ones. The favorite tea in the report was actually the Simplified Yun, which is a 2001 recipe, and it was Malaysian storage. So storage definitely plays a pretty major part in kind of the appreciation of these teas. If you, for instance, bought a 7542 that was even 20 years old stored in Kunming, that's going to taste a whole lot different than something stored in Guangdong, let alone Malaysia, where the aging is just going to be a bit more accelerated, and it's just frankly going to do different things to the tea. So that was my favorite. Unfortunately, it's not one that it would be cheap to order or even available. I don't know where you could buy that tea currently right now. It is a pretty sought after tea. There have been multiple controversies to the ones that have actually been sold in the West, where people have thought that certain ones are fake or whatnot. I don't know. You'd have to look at them very individually, do some sort of deep dive investigative journalism on those. So I couldn't say as far as that goes, but I will say that I really like that one. That one was from Max over at Teas We Like. So thank you to Max. Also, kind of the recommendations I did, especially in regards to price, were the 2010 or 2011, which you can get from Teas We Like or as Quiche for an even cheaper price. Those are probably like the sweet spot in terms of I just don't want to spend too much money for them. And it will tell you a bit about the recipe. It's just going to be a little bit weaker than the recipe in 2005, 2006. Or you could go back a few years to 2006 where Quiche sells the 7542 for about $100. I think that's, I've talked with a couple of veteran tea drinkers and some people have told me that that's kind of where they think the sweet spot is. And I think I agree. It really is not very expensive, and I think it does represent kind of what it's a little bit worse, of course, than the sought-after batches in 2005, but I think it feels like the same recipe and the same tea there. 2006 definitely worth checking out. 2005s, if they're ever available, are also pretty interesting. They're quite a bit cheaper than stuff that happened before the reform in 2004. So if you are concerned about value, then I think looking at that is good. And if you are less concerned about value and then going before reform, you can definitely get some pretty great tea there. There's a reason why those tend to be more expensive and sought after. Part of it is the quantity, but the quality was also just much better. So you can order something like the Purple Dye 7542 from Quiche, get a sample of that, and that will give you a good idea of it. So definitely highly recommend people benchmark some sort of 7542 or get the feel for it, because it's frankly good tea. And for me, at least, I would rather drink a decent 7542 over even tea that is technically better material quality a lot of times, like maybe 7 or 8 times out of 10, frankly speaking. But, that's me. Everyone's going to differ a little bit, and I think that's fine. But I think everyone should definitely try it, because these are very well-known recipes, and frankly, it's a good recipe, and they've been doing it a long time, and there's some good tea to be enjoyed, and the price has really not been as low as this in quite some time. Okay, so hopefully that wasn't too random of rambling, so thank you all for tuning in. I'll see you all next time. Cheers.